Hi, my name is Barry Sterling Mitchell. I produce the Sterling Net Point Power Rankings and the Bias Plus Reports. Today is January 24th, 2025, and this is Ben and Barry on football.
What's going on out there, everybody? This is Ben Dickerson. I am your co-host. I don't have any who would have thunk it's, but as everyone knows, this is championship weekend, conference championship weekend. We're getting down to the nitty-gritty. One game in each conference away from the Super Bowl. But what also goes on around this time of year every year is coaching moves. Coaches interviewing, coordinators interviewing for head coaching positions, guys setting themselves up possibly to go as coordinators to new places, on new staffs, and things of that nature. So there's been a lot of stuff going on. Pete Carroll has resurrected himself and gone to the Raiders. All kinds of things going on there. Aaron Glenn, DC for the Lions, took the New York Jets job. Ben Johnson, OC for the Lions. He's taking the Chicago Bears job, which was kind of speculated. I don't know if he's from Chicago, but I know he kind of coveted that job. Yeah. He really likes Caleb Williams, so on and so forth. But this was a very curious one, and one that I found a little icky, for lack of a better word. So LIam Cohn is the offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Jacksonville Jaguars, who fired Doug Peterson, are looking for a new head coach. He was one of three strong candidates. Robert Saleh was one. I forget who the third person was. So they asked him to do a video interview. The Buccaneers got wind of it. They did not want him to leave. They asked him what would it take for him to stay. Evidently, he threw out a number. They said, that number's good. We can do that. But we want you to go ahead for the experience and take the interview. So he did. Now, when they came back with the contract offer, which he, in principle, accepted, one of the stipulations was that you can no longer go back and try to interview, because he told the Jacksonville Jaguars that he didn't want the job.
He did the interview, though.
He took the interview, yes. And they encouraged him to take it for the experience. I don't think he's ever tried for a head coach job before. So they thought they were doing a good thing by him. But they did stipulate you can't change your mind and go back and interview again and take the job. And I think they did that after Jacksonville fired their GM, who supposedly a lot of people had problems with, Trent Baalke. They've been turned down by other coaches because of Trent Baalke. So they finally fired him. So they tried to contact LIam Cohn yesterday to finalize the contract, and they couldn't reach him. So either later on in the day, or I don't think it was this morning, it was later in the day yesterday, they finally got a hold of him, and he said, and that I'll tell you this, I know you heard stuff like this before. He told them that he was at the doctor's office with his son all day. Now, turns out, and you know they're going to find stuff out, turns out he flew to Jacksonville against their wishes, interviewed a second time, and took the job. Nasty work. Terrible. One thing, you screwed the Bucks. The second thing is, I'm not saying I'm a choir boy. I'm no angel. But one thing I would never do, when I call in sick from work, I might say I'm sick when I'm not sick. But I would never lie on my kids like that. when I was a supervisor and I had people working under me, I can remember people having 4 grandmothers die. You only get 2 grandmothers, okay? You, I gotta go to the funeral. My grandmother died. I'm like, dude, 2.5 years ago, your grandmother died. But anyway, that's nasty work right there. But anyway, he did it. So not only did he become the head coach, but I think they made him like head coach slash GM. They gave him all control. Yeah, it was probably hard for him to turn down.
Well, I guess so, but he's never been a GM, right?
He's never been a GM. He's never been a head coach. Nope.
They gave him both of them.
Pretty much. I mean, they'll probably hire a GM in name, but it's kind of like what Belichick had. He has full control. He has final say over everything. Yeah, so that was kind of crazy. I'm sure there's a couple little details that I probably left out, but for the most part, he basically broke his verbal agreement with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and went to Jacksonville instead. So even though Tampa Bay and Jacksonville are close to each other, he is now in the AFC South as opposed to the NFC South. What are you going to do?
Who can trust him? That's the question that keeps on.
I'm looking at him funny from now on.
Man, because you just don't know what that guy's going to do, man.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. That's crazy. All right. Well, Benny, we'll take a quick look at the rankings, and then we'll jump into the bias plus reports. And it won't be a big, long show because it's not a lot of games. But let's get ready to take a quick look at the rankings. All right. The Sterling Net Point Power Rankings and the Bias Plus Reports. That was for January 22nd. The day is the 24th. Nothing's changed. No games since then. Let's take a quick look at the rankings and where everybody is. Now, the first thing we usually do is we give kudos to those in first place. We will skip Detroit because they're no longer in. Philadelphia now has the first place in average points against. In scoring defense, Philly is number 1. And Buffalo retains their number 1 spot in turnover differential, average turnover differential, ATLD, with plus 1.4. So congratulations to Philly and Buffalo as they continue on their quest for the Super Bowl. Let's look down at the average net points, ANP, and see where everybody stands. You'll see them in blue. Detroit's still in first place. There were some scoring crazy people, that was for sure. But Buffalo is now at the top of the list at 9.6 average net points per game. And again, net points is the difference between points for and points against, and it can be positive or negative, as can be average turnover differential. So Buffalo and Philly are close, 0.2 difference between the two in terms of net points. And then Washington comes in at plus 5.8. They're in 7th place. You got Baltimore, Tampa, and Green Bay in between them. And then you drop down to 11th place with average net points of plus 3.8 for Kansas City. So Kansas City and Philly have been winning by small margins. Philly must have had a couple good ones, and that put them in 3rd place in average net points. Over in points for, Buffalo coming in 2nd place at 30.7 points per game. Look at Washington, 29.1 points per game. Philly, 27 points per game. And as we scroll down a little bit more, Kansas City coming in at 22.7 points per game. Now, Kansas City can get away with that because they're coming in 3rd place in average points against at 18.9 points per game. There they go right there. Buffalo coming in 8th at 21.1 points per game. Then we have to drop down to the lower half. And Tampa Bay is coming in, Washington is coming in at 23.3 points per game and average points allowed. So that's the lowest ranking of any of the teams. Now, turnover differential, Philly's 2nd at plus 0.9. Washington is ninth at plus 0.4. Kansas City 10th at plus 0.3. So you kind of see where everybody ended the season or ended the last playoff game. But this includes the last playoff games, and you can kind of see where everybody stands before we move on. Benny, any comments, questions?
No, this is probably pretty close to what we have around this time of year every year, where the teams that are left for the conference championships aren't necessarily all in the top 5 or 6. As you can see, the Chiefs in average net points are at 11. They're even lower, down around 15 in points for, and they're in the back end. No, I'm sorry. They're in the top end in average points against, and kind of midway there was that number 10 in average turnover differential. And Washington's sitting pretty in average net points too. So they're all almost within the top 10, with Kansas City being at 11 in the major ranking category. That's pretty normal. But it's anybody's ball game at this point. We got 2 really good matchups coming up. So,
all right, well, let's go to the matchups then, Benny, as we scroll down from here. And as we always tell you, those in the lower half don't get to the championship. So you can see there's only Washington. And really, they're not that far off. If you look at Buffalo's 21.1, Washington's 23.3. What's that, 2.2 points difference? So not a big difference between the two relative to defense. All right, so we have the Bias Plus Reports NFL Conference Championships for 2024-2025. And the first game up, Commanders. Benny, if the Commanders win this game, although the Eagles have a Bias Plus score of 5.6 in their favor, I want you to say, Commanders.
I don't think that's going to happen, bro.
Oh, come on, man.
However, I will be extremely proud of my man Magic. And I'm not talking about Magic Johnson. Although I don't know if you saw the video. When that game ended last week and the Commanders were on their way to the locker room, they were kind of all just filing in one by one. Magic was in the hallway, man, dapping up everybody.
He's dapping them up.
Dapping them up, hugs. I mean, let's face it, this is Magic Johnson. This guy played for the Showtime Lakers. He ain't your average everyday owner. You know what I'm saying? He knows what it's like to be in the competitive part of this, in the trenches. You know, and he was loving it, man. He was loving it.
Goodness, it's crazy. It's crazy. So the Bias Plus favors the Eagles. What say you?
Well, let's continue to talk about my man Magic, the other Magic, Jaden Magic Daniels, as named by you, by the way. He threw for 299, he ran for 51, and he did not turn the ball over as the Commanders upset the Detroit Lions. That was a game that I would actually consider an upset. In Washington's first playoff win in 19 years last week against Tampa Bay, Daniels became the first rookie in NFL history to lead his team in passing yards and rushing yards in a playoff game. His 242 passing yards in the first half against Detroit last weekend is also a rookie record and helped in a big way to Washington scoring 28 points in the second quarter of the Detroit game, which is also an NFL playoff team record. So records was falling at his feet. Shout out to the Commanders O-line. Brian Robinson Jr. ran for 77 yards, and 2 touchdowns on only 15 carries. And Daniels was never sacked and only touched twice in that game against Detroit. The defense recorded 4 interceptions. One of them was a pick 6. They recovered a sack fumble, and 3 of the 5 total turnovers resulted in touchdowns. That's how you win ball games. You create turnovers and you take advantage of the turnovers by converting them to points. 5 turnovers, 3 converted to touchdowns, not field goals, touchdowns. That's big. Now, big plays were the theme of the day as the Eagles defeated the feisty LA Rams. That score was 28-22. Saquon Barkley rushed for 205 on 25 carries. He had breakaway touchdown runs of 62 yards and 78 yards. Let me tell you, when a running back breaks off long runs, we're not talking about he broke off a 35-yarder. We're not talking about he was in the red zone and he broke free and scored. 62 and 78-yard touchdown runs are back-breaking plays. Jalen Hurts rushed for 70 yards on 7 carries. That's a 10-yard per carry average, mainly because he also had a breakaway touchdown run of 44 yards. The league's #1 defense, was on point. They recovered 2 Rams fumbles. They recorded 5 sacks, 6 quarterback hits. Poor Matt Stafford took a beating. 10 tackles for loss. Kyron Williams also took a beating. And this is a huge number, folks. 11 passes defensed. You don't usually see a big number like that, especially against a team that has a really good passing game. The Eagles secondary was flying around like crazy. Let's remember, however, that the game was never out of reach, actually, for the Rams until their very last possession when they got stopped on downs with 31 seconds left in the game. So although I know a lot of Eagles fans were feeling pretty comfortable there, that last drive, they could have actually, if they had scored and kicked the extra point, they could have won that game. Yep. So that thing still was kind of in question there all the way to the very end, but the Eagles did, in fact, pull it out. Now, this is the thing that bothers me for the Eagles. If you take, and I'm not going to say take away, a lot of people like, if you take away this play and you take away that play, we could have won. I'm not saying that. But if you take the 205 total rushing yards for Saquon and you subtract the 2 long runs, he averaged like 3 yards a carry. So it wasn't like he was running roughshod over these boys. But like I said, those big plays are backbreaking to a defense. They really hurt you. And that's exactly what they did. And they hampered the Rams just enough to keep them at bay and have them questioning their defense, and kind of made, offensively kind of made them feel like maybe their running game wasn't going to be sufficient. And I mean, it's all good. That's what you do. That's football, But I don't want to say they had Saquon under control. I just want to make it clear that he wasn't like gashing them. The problem is the Eagles' offensive line is so damn good that 3 yards here, 5 yards here, 7 yards here, and then bang. And the bang is coming. Yeah. That's what makes them so dangerous. So, that being said, as good as Daniels has been playing, and I'm not saying they cannot win. They obviously can win. But I really don't think that their defense, which is not a top defense against the run, is going to be able to handle the Eagles' ground game. And the Eagles, unlike the Baltimore Ravens, believe in their ground game, and I doubt very seriously if they go away from it, even for a little bit. The only way that could happen is if by chance the Commanders jump out to a lead, which also could happen. So this is a tough one to call. But I got to say, to me, when I look at my criteria for teams that are going to advance all the way to the Super Bowl, you got to have an elite run game, which the Eagles have, and you have to have a really good to elite, really good to great defense, which the Eagles have. So I'm going to have to pick the Eagles to win this game.
You know, the interesting thing about Washington, when I looked at their OCDC setup, number one, Quinn has a pretty good defensive history. He was part of that Seattle defense.
He's a Legion of Boom leader.
He's a Legion of Boom leader, right, right. And then the other thing is, from what I understand, and I have to take a quick look here. Let me see now if I can, because the defensive coordinator, Joe Witt, is kind of known for interceptions.
Okay.
They're really, really good with it. He was the secondary defensive passing game coordinator for the Cowboys over the last 3 years. His unit led the league with 59 interceptions.
Yes, that was that Cowboys defense that had takeaways up the yin yang. That was just a couple of years ago.
Yeah. In 2021, the Cowboys finished in the top 10 for opponent completion percentage at only 59.5. He was the secondary defensive passing game coordinator for the Falcons in 2020. And his unit ranked 7th against the pass and had 14 interceptions, tied for 8th in the NFL. And he was with the Packers. During his time with them, he helped them win Super Bowl. What's XLV? What would that be? 45? And coached the Packers to
I think so.
Coached the Packers to a league high 176 interceptions, while ranking 9th in opponent passer rating. So they got the right guy. No doubt about it. They got the right guys. But one thing you have to say about both teams is they don't really turn the ball over. Hurts has been really good and not turning the ball over, and so has Daniels. Last week, you went with who was it? You went with
last week. I picked the Lions to beat the Commanders, and but I did have the Eagles over the Rams.
I remember saying that it was going to come down to turnovers.
Yes, which is exactly what it came down to. Jared Goff crapped the bed. Yeah. And, you know, one of the great things about the NFL, and it's a very simple statement, a movie was made about it, it's been talked about forever and always. Any given Sunday. I don't care how great you are for 8 games, 10 games, 17 games. You could have that one game at the wrong time, which is exactly what he had. And if the other team takes advantage of your miscues, you're cooked. That's exactly what happened.
Exactly. And, you know, I don't normally, say who I think personally is going to win. Sometimes I have a rooting interest. Generally, my rooting interest is for the team that is favored by the bias.
Right.
However, the Eagles, we live in Philly. And we're going to have to see.
This is him, folks. This ain't me this time.
This is me. We're going to have to listen to so much crap, However, you and I are big fans of Saquon.
Absolutely.
And if there's anybody that I would like to see win the Super Bowl, it's Saquon.
I won't be mad at him.
I won't be mad at him. But I do have a bit of a rooting interest for Jaden Magic Daniels. You know, I mean, I do have a bit of a rooting interest. So I'm torn rooting wise, but long story short, bias favors the Eagles. Ben's going with the Eagles, going with the bias. All right. Second game. Oh, man. Second game. Bills at Chiefs. And look at this, Benny. Bias plus score of 10.2 favors the Bills.
As it should.
As it should. As it should. So,
and that's a healthy bias.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. That's a healthy bias. And again, you know, Chiefs have been winning by the skin of their chin all year, you know, coming up with big plays at big times. The Bills have not turned the ball over, and they're winning the turnover battle, number one in average turnover differential. I know when I watched the game last week, I kept saying, who are the Chiefs playing? Whoever it was, I kept saying, you know, if you guys would
Houston,
if you guys would focus on stopping Kelsey, you might stand a darn chance to win this game. And Kelsey went wild. He's running around like, does nobody want to cover this guy or what?
I was very surprised at that. I'll tell you the truth. I was extremely surprised at that because they did a good job against the run. Not a great job, but they did a good job against the run. The guy that they should have really focused on, and I may have even said that during last week's video, was Kelsey. But they had no answer for him. I thought they should have put one of the safeties on him, but I don't know what was going on.
Just for the fun of it, I actually played Madden with my Niners against all four of these teams.
Mm-hmm.
And I beat them all. However, the hardest team to beat, I have to admit, was the Chiefs.
Okay.
Those guys are opportunistic at the very least. And when I look at their, you know, people keep saying, well, they don't really have the receivers. They don't have this. You know something? They got some people on the Chiefs who were great and are still really good. Okay.
They got everything they need, bro.
They got Nuke, okay.
Who's now a big time possession guy.
At running back, they have
Kareem Hunt has taken over for Pacheco.
I have always liked Kareem Hunt. Okay.
Yep.
Kareem Hunt is no joke. And they still got what's his name that was with the Pittsburgh and now he's with them.
Juju
Smith-Schuster.
Yeah, well, Juju's he's an opportunist, but they got a big play guy in Worthy, who I don't think they really use him enough, to tell you the truth. They try to lull you to sleep with him on a couple of fly sweeps, and they'll hit him on a couple of long comebacks. But they haven't really.
Juju will catch a ball now and then.
That's what I'm saying. He'll have 3 targets, 2 catches, 1 touchdown.
You know what I'm saying? And maybe a first down in there too. You know,
he can hurt you. He can hurt you.
You know, they have an interesting conglomeration of receivers with experience, and then the newer guys with the speed and all that. So they've got an interesting group of people. And I do want to say this: Mahomes last week, it was the first time that I can remember actually saying that Mahomes was literally this, levitating in the air and threw a touchdown last week.
Yeah, that was an extremely I don't even know how to describe that pass because he was like 2 inches off the ground.
Yeah.
And he was still able to fire a bullet.
And Kelsey catches it, and everybody looks at him like, what happened? And he just goes.
Well, I watched that play a couple times, and I watched Dan Orlovsky. You know, he likes to break down tape. And basically, after Kelsey ran his route, he realized, oh, he still got the ball. So I'm going to move from this window, which is a little small, over to this window, which is a little bit bigger, and just stand right here. And like coaches say, show him your numbers, show the quarterback your numbers, and there he is, bang.
Bang.
They all turn around and look like, oh, because they thought he was over there. He just slid. He slid like barely 3 feet.
But it was enough. It was enough. It's like when we talk about pocket quarterbacks, you know, if they slide 2 or 3 feet to one side or the other, they buy themselves 3 to 5 seconds sometimes. So, yeah, I just thought that was an amazing. All you had to do was put a cape on Mahomes, and he would look like Superman for him. So, all right, Benny. Bias plus score favors the Bills, and you have.
Well, you know, the Bills used to be my favorite AFC team, and I was remembering this. We hadn't talked about it in a while, but I remember at the beginning of the season, you said to me, "Are the Bills still?" You know, I was like, "I'm through with them guys, man. I'm done. I'm done. I'm going with Cincinnati." Remember that? You don't even remember that.
Yeah, I remember that. Not when
Okay.
home.
Well, I must admit, they have redeemed themselves in my eyes. Not that they care, but whatever. They hosted Baltimore last weekend in the divisional round, and they had to hold off the mistake-prone but still very dangerous Ravens all the way to the very end of the game. The difference in this one was, like I said, Ravens mistakes and 3 turnovers. And obviously the turnovers were mistakes, but they made other mistakes too, mainly drop balls. The Bills were able to turn 2 of the 3 takeaways into points, and they were only penalized once. The Ravens were penalized 5 times. Again, mistakes, proving the old adage that the team that makes the fewest mistakes usually wins. It's exactly what the hell happened. And even though the Bills were outproduced in several categories, like I looked at all the stat lines, Baltimore actually looked like they played the better game. They outproduced the Bills in total yards, first downs, and third down efficiency. 3 categories that you would think, if I told you this team did this and this team did that, you would have said that team probably won.
Yeah.
But it didn't happen because that's how critical making mistakes and penalties can hurt you. In the end, a missed 2-point conversion ended up being the winning margin instead of the game going to overtime. And people were on Facebook. Listen to this, man. There was people on Facebook arguing about whether or not that was a good or bad pass to Mark Andrews. Can you believe that? You saw it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like 100 times, right? You know, there were people saying it was a bad pass. I swear, man. Sometimes I don't know what people be looking at.
It hit him in the hands, you know.
Yeah, that should be period right there.
Yeah, it hit him in the hands. But I mean, I only give Mark Andrews a little bit of grace because those field conditions was crazy. You know what it reminded me of, though? Going way back to our days of playing in the Bell League, in the championship. And I remember we were on the goal line and we need to score. And I run a hook. And when I hooked, the quarterback threw me the ball. Problem was, it was so muddy that when I turned around and stopped, I kept sliding back. Hit the ground. It happens sometimes. It just happens like that sometimes. And again, you don't want to put yourself in a situation where one play can make the difference. And I do believe when I was talking about the turnovers, that was the game I was talking about right there. So,
okay.
Yeah, and I read somewhere one coach or somebody said you'll lose more games than you'll win. You know?
Yeah, when you turn the ball over, you will lose more games than you win. There's no doubt about that. In fact, there was only one bad turnover game that I can remember happening the entire season out of all 32 teams where the team that had a bad turnover game actually won, and that was, in fact, the Lions. So Jared Goff had a really bad game before. He threw like 5 interceptions or some mess.
Yeah. Wow.
Or he threw 4 and he had a fumble or something crazy, and they still won the game. I can't remember who they were playing, but that was an anomaly. Believe me, they had no right to win that game, screwing up like that.
The thing about that is that the Lions, no matter what they do, can still score 30 points.
Yeah.
And then lost to the Washington. They still scored what, 31 points. Washington scored 45,
Right.
but they scored 31. So
Right.
they can score, no doubt about it. We'll see how that goes next year with the new OCs and et cetera. But
Yeah, we'll see. I'm interested in seeing who gets those jobs, those coordinator jobs.
oh man, tell me about it. Tell me about
But the Chiefs in their game against the Texans, they started off really fast with the opening kickoff. They returned the ball 63 yards on the opening kickoff, but they had to settle for a field goal at the end of that. That was their opening drive. Next time they got the ball, they had to settle for another field goal. And then finally, they scored their first touchdown on a Kareem Hunt run, a 1 yard run. That was in the second quarter. They took a 13-6 lead in the halftime, and they matched the third quarter touchdown by the Texans with a touchdown of their own. That was a pass from Mahomes to Kelsey, the one we talked about. That gave them a 20-12 lead, and they never relinquished the lead. Kelsey had a really big day, 7 catches for 117 yards. Defensively, this is where they really took it to the Texans. And I'll tell you the truth, this one caught me by surprise too. I thought the Texans defense was kind of on a bit of a hot streak, but in fact, they were nothing close to what the Chiefs defense did. They sacked C.J. Stroud 8 times. They hit him 14 times. They were in the backfield more than Joe Mixon was. It's crazy. The final score was 23-14. So again, Steve Spagnuolo, one of the greatest defensive coordinators ever, who, as far as I can remember, has never taken a head coaching job. I'm sure he's been offered, and I'm sure he's taken plenty of interviews, but he knows when he's got a good thing going, and he seems to be content there. He's got 2 rings with the Chiefs. He's got 2 rings with the Giants. Yeah, he's got 4 rings as a coordinator. Here's a man that knows his niche. Now, picking who's going to win. I'll tell you, it's not like the Bills have never beaten the Chiefs, because they have. And even in a game or two where the Chiefs actually beat them, they were barn burners. The Chiefs, the Bills should probably come into Kansas City with a lot of confidence. Boy. The only question for the Bills winning this game is when Spagnuolo turns up the heat and sends the house, is Josh going to be able to handle it? He's been playing well.
I kept wondering why the Texans didn't have more plays. What am I thinking about? Like, quick passes outside. You know what I mean? Screen passes, things of that nature, things that take advantage of the blitz. Didn't seem like they were ready with that.
I don't know. I'd have to go back and look. I'm sure they had a few. I know they tried to get Mixon out in the flat a couple times, but it just sometimes that pressure is just, you're thrown off your back foot. Even the quick passes are coming out a little bit too fast. And when the Chiefs blitz, they bring it. I mean, they really bring it. So I tell you what, I know people are going to think I'm scary on this one. And I've been trying to pick out losses for the Chiefs in various weeks during the regular season. And I really think the Bills might have them this time.
Struggling over there, man. You're struggling over there.
I'm struggling big time, bro. And help me out here. Average points against, where's Buffalo?
Scroll back up here.
APA, Buffalo is 8th. Kansas City is 3rd. But APF, Buffalo is 2nd, and Kansas City is 15th.
That's why Buffalo is second here, and Kansas City is 11th, and that's where you get that big.
And that's why that's the big bias, right?
And like you said, but the Bills have won a number of games against Kansas City, but they're usually during the regular season.
I'm going to take Buffalo.
Going with the bias.
I think Buffalo can get them this time. Yes. So I'm going with the bias in both games. I believe that the Bills will beat the Chiefs this time. They've been, I don't want to say struggling, but they've been kind of limping along, and somehow they've been. And this whole trend of people going on social media and showing replays of certain plays of the Chiefs where the refs are supposedly cheating for them, that's picking up steam. I remember when it was first started happening, you couldn't cut on ESPN. Nobody would say anything about it. But now they're starting to talk about it. They're really starting to talk about it. I mean, and Mahomes didn't help himself by flopping on the sideline last week. That was a classic. That was a classic flop.
I think he admitted to flopping.
Oh, did he?
I think, but long story short, you're absolutely right. And who was it? The old Cowboys quarterback was talking about it.
Tony Romo?
No.
Or Aikman.
Aikman, yeah. And he was complaining about it, because they didn't.
Well, he was very upset about the roughing call.
Yeah.
All he did, he contacted him here with two hands and gave him a little shove.
Yeah.
Could have been way, way worse. He could have blown him up. But he didn't. That was egregious. You can't make that call. That's horrible. But
all right. So you're going with the Bills. Going with the bias. Amazing. All right, Benny. Going with the Bills. Now look, I know we're deep into the playoffs. We don't normally do bias plus busters of the week, but I decided to do one anyway. What the heck? Because that'll be.
Well, it should have been one last week, right?
Yeah, there was one last week, and the bias plus buster of division weekend
must have been the Chiefs. Oh, it was the Commanders.
It was the Commanders.
Oh, of course it was. Yeah.
9.3 is not a big score, but it's the only game that, the bias was wrong on. So that had to go to the Washington Commanders.
Right. And like I said, that was the one game that I considered a real upset.
Absolutely. So going with the Bills, going with the Eagles.
Yep, that's your Super Bowl.
That's your Super Bowl, according to Ben Dickerson and the bias. So that would be the Eagles. And what I said earlier in the season, and it seems like it's going to be really funny. I said, if the Eagles wind up playing the Bills in the Super Bowl, it's going to be a tush-push fest. The Bills do it too.
Both teams do it extremely well.
The Bills do it too. The Bills are tush-pushing like a...
The Bills are really good at it.
Yeah.
Well, Josh Allen's 6'5".
Yeah, exactly. He don't even need a push. He's hardly,
Right.
So that would be an interesting Super Bowl. But we're gonna wait and see what the actual results are for this game. So all right. Well, that's all I got, Benny. You got anything else for the peoples?
Oh, excuse me. No, I don't think so. Let me see what's going on out there. No, I'm good.
All right. Well, let me get cracking on getting ready to edit and post this information. Good stuff, Benny.
All right, bro.
Peace.